join us on this fiery episode of Mindset Mavericks. I'm your host, John Coogan. I'm sat today with Dave Albin. So, Dave, I'm really excited to get chatting to you. I know you've got a fascinating story for us, but I'm going to do a quick introduction just to give the listeners an idea who we're speaking to. So I know through this episode, we're looking to explore a bit of your journey from struggles with addiction to becoming a leading firewalking instructor in the United States. So we're going to look to get some insights into why Tony Robbins uses firewalking at his events, how you became the go-to expert for major businesses like Google and NASA, and talk about the profound impact that firewalking can have on personal and professional development. So there's quite a few topics, quite a broad range I wanted to speak to you about. So first of all, thank you very much for being with me today.
Thanks for doing this, John. Hosts are the greatest. You guys do all the work. And so all I've got to do is come in here and run my pie hole. So, it's great to be here. It's an honor.
Well, it's a pleasure for me too. So thank you very much. What I wanted to do, I know I've just given the audience a bit of an outline as to what you're doing now, but I want to explore how you got to where you are now.
Yeah.
So can you take us back really to your growing up and what your aspirations were like, what your childhood was like?
Yeah. Well, a couple of months before I was born, my biological father, we don't know exactly what happened, John. All we know is that he hurt his head somehow. And to save his life, they put a plate in his head. And he complained to mom all the time how painful it was. And he even said, he made comments once in a while like, I don't know how much longer I can take this. And so one day he told mom he was going to the grocery store, and we never saw or heard from him again. So I know very little about my biological father. So when I was born to a single mom. She already had two boys from another marriage. And we were all living in a one-bedroom apartment in Hollywood, California. And when I mean all of us, I had two half-brothers. I had a cousin, a grandmother, and my mother and myself. So it was a little crowded in that one-bedroom apartment.
Wow.
And mom was a hard worker. She came from what I say is the greatest generation of all time, because that whole generation that raised us, raised the baby boomers, if you want to look at it that way. They went through the Great Depression. They went through World War II. And a lot of people don't realize that when the men were off fighting the war in Europe, the Americans were, and the Allies were fighting the Nazis in Germany, at the same time, the Navy and the Air Force were fighting, and the Marines were fighting the Japanese in the Pacific. So the country was divided. All the men were out at war. And so what's interesting about that is that how it raised a whole culture of women. Like what were the women doing during that time? Well, the women were doing everything. Literally, they built rifles and pistols and munitions and tanks and jeeps. And my biological mother, was known as Rosie the Riveter. She was literally building B-17 bombers. And so it's interesting that, I hear this thing like, well, can women do this and can women do that? And I laugh because I'm like, are you kidding me? But if it wasn't for women during World War II, Hitler would have taken over the world. And so anyway, that was my mom, right? This was in 1954, when I was born, and we were living in Hollywood, California, and she was working up the street at the Roosevelt Hotel, pretty famous hotel there in Hollywood. And she was pulling every shift she could pull. She was working double and triples, and she was working really, really hard. Well, it wasn't enough. She couldn't feed all those mouths. And so the bottom line is she went to her older sister one day when I was about 5 years old and said, hey, Pat, can you adopt David? I just can't afford to take care of him anymore. And thank goodness that, her oldest sister, Pat Albin, said, yeah, sure, we'll adopt him. And they did. And so now I'm being adopted by my aunt and uncle, literally, who I'm 5 years old. I don't know that, right? I just know as I get older, that's mom and dad. And so Bob Albin was a highly decorated World War II hero. He was career military. He was an officer in the National Guard and in the regular Army. And so, he came from World War II in that whole era. And so that's what I was raised in, that culture. And it was wonderful. We had a wonderful life for years. We went camping a lot. We did things. We went out to dinner a lot. They spent time with me. It was really wonderful. And then one day it changed. And it changed on the first day of summer in 1964. And so, it's the first day of summer. You're a kid, what are you doing? You're like, great. I'm off for summer. Here we go. We're going to go camping. We're going to do all these things. And that's not what happened. I'm sitting in the TV room. It's early that morning. Mom comes in, and I'm going to refer to her as mom, even though she's my adopted mother because she did raise me. Mom comes in and she says, David, come in the kitchen. We need to speak with you. And so I go into the kitchen and I sit down, and my dad's over here and my mom's over here. And my mom puts her hand on my arm like this, and she looks at me, and with tears in her eyes, she goes, David, we need to tell you something. And what we need to tell you is we're not your parents. What? What is that? What do you mean you're not my parents? Of course you're my parents, because I don't know anything else at this point, right?
Yeah.
So it was a very, very strange moment, if you will. Very confusing, obviously. And then they even went on to tell me that, your Aunt Dean that you call Aunt Dean, of course I know who she is. Well, she's actually your mother. She gave birth to you. And so now and I'm thinking, I don't even like her. And the reason I don't like her, I don't want to say that in any disrespectful way, is that every time she was around me, she wanted to be around me. She wanted to sit right next to me. She wanted to hold me. She wanted to hug me. Well, duh, I'm her son.
Yeah.
No wonder she wanted to do that, right? It was never disrespectful, anything like that. It was always, again, any opportunity she had to be around me, she wanted to be sitting right next to me. So, as I got older, that made a lot of sense to me. But in that moment, it didn't. I was like, do I have to hang out with her? You know what I mean? I'm a typical kid, right? So shortly after they told me this, again, this is in the summer of 1964, both of them started drinking. They had sworn off drinking when I was 5 years old when they adopted me. And again, right after they told me this, they both started drinking. Well, things got ugly really fast. My mom, Pat, who's raising me, she was kind of a funny drunk. She would sit at the kitchen table and pass out. She wasn't mean or nasty or any of that. Bob, on the other hand, oh yeah, he was brutal. He'd smack you upside your head, in a moment's notice. So he was very violent. The alcoholism, and there was a lot going on back then. I'm not trying to justify any of that. I'm just saying, President Kennedy had been assassinated in November of 1963. That happened. The Bay of Pigs was going on. Khrushchev put all those missiles from Russia and Cuba. They were right there on the border of America. So there was a lot of threat of nuclear war, and my dad knew what was going on. He was working in and out of the Pentagon, so he knew. So there was a lot of pressure on him. He was scared to death that the world was coming to an end. And then they had to tell me that I was adopted. So I'm thinking that all added to it, and the pressure got to him, and they both started drinking. And so that's when it started for me as far as that road of drugs and alcohol. They went to the grocery store one day, John, and I didn't know what alcohol was. I just saw these two beautiful people drinking this stuff and turned into, it's like, what is it? What's going on? What is that stuff? So they went to the grocery store one day, and I knew it. They were hiding it right over there in plain sight. And I went over and I got a coffee cup, and it was brandy. And I poured it, into a coffee cup about half full, and I downed it. Smelled horrible, tasted horrible. I thought I was going to throw up. But man, as soon as that stuff went into my body and it got into my bloodstream, it was like rocket fuel. It was just unbelievable feeling. And I totally believed that I was an alcoholic right there on the spot. There I am at a very, very young age. And so it escalated from there. I wanted to drink more. I started stealing it. I started drinking it. And just one thing led to another. By the time I was a junior in high school, they called me into the principal's office one day and said, Albin, you're out. We're expelling you from school. You're a danger to the community, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I don't care. Great. I didn't care. I didn't think in that moment that anything that I was learning in school was going to affect my well-being going forward in life. I just didn't. I was an entrepreneur at a young age. We lived across the street from a golf course. And there was a big park and a golf course. And when I'd ride my Stingray bicycle over there, I started finding golf balls. Because, here's what I learned about golfers early on. They suck. They're just not good at the game, right? And so these little white golf ball things, I could turn them into money. And they were laying all over the place. And I could just go get them, and I'd clean them up, and I'd take them back to the parking lot where, the golfers parked, and I'd sell them back to the golfers. So I was like, wow, okay, this is kind of cool. My mom grew beautiful flowers in the backyard. I mean, thousands of them. She had a really big planter of just thousands of flowers, and they were beautiful. So mom would cut them, and she did something really unique. She cut them at an angle. She didn't cut them at the bottom. And apparently the reason she cut them at an angle is it opened up more surface area so more water would get into the plant. And then she'd bundle them up for me. She had a beautiful eye for color. She'd bundle them up. She'd put them in a bucket, and she'd put some 7-Up into the water. Well, hell, my flowers would outlast the local florist 3-1. And I don't know to this day why. I'm guessing it must have something to do, the 7-Up has something to do with sugar. And the way she would cut them, it just caused the flower to last longer. So I was selling flowers on the street corner. I also had a paper route, right? So 7 days a week, I'd ride my bicycle. I'd go pick up my papers, fold them, put them on my saddlebags, and go ride my route and throw and deliver papers. So, again, I learned at a very early age that there's money out there. Go get it. And so when I got kicked out of high school, I didn't care. I went and got a job that quick, right? Because that's the kind of mindset I had. And I got a really good job. Shortly after I got kicked out of high school, I went and bought a brand new Mach 1 Mustang, which was just a freaking beautiful car, muscle car, if you will. They call them that here in the United States. And so life was good, and I was making good money, and I needed to make good money because I still had an alcohol and a drug problem. The grocery store I was working at, the job I got, I was working the night crew. So I went in at like 10:30 at night, and I was up all night. Well, that turned into, I was taking amphetamines to stay awake at night, and then, trying to sleep during the day, and I put tinfoil on my windows. I mean, it was a mess. And then it just escalated from there. I got married, I got divorced. I got married again, I got divorced. I moved from California to Virginia. And then I got married my third time to a woman who had 3 kids. And I thought, you know what? If I married this woman with 3 kids, maybe I can get sober and get my life together. And I did, for about a month. And then it all came back on me. And, thinking that I could drink in moderation, or thinking that I could control it, or, all this just downright wrong information that I was processing through my head, that I could control my alcohol. I'd only drink on weekends, all this stuff. You're trying to negotiate with something that will kill you in a heartbeat, both drugs and alcohol. And so, one day I woke up on June 8th, 1988, and I said, that's it. We are done. I cannot do this every day, live like this. I just can't. I was in so much physical and emotional pain that I decided probably the best thing to do was to take my life. Well, the problem with that is, and thank goodness, in a moment of compassion, I said, wait a minute. If you pull the trigger on that and you take your own life, who do you think is going to clean it up? Those 3 kids upstairs who are in like junior high school, if you will, they're going to see it. And that's going to be a horrible, horrible trauma-based experience for them. And I didn't even know what PTSD was back then, but it would have been horrible. I would have ruined their lives. And I said to myself, you can't do that, man. That's wrong. I understand you're all messed up, but don't ruin their life. You got to figure out a better way, pal. Come up with a better idea. And so as I sat there, the next thing I remember thinking was, oh, I know. I'll call Alcoholics Anonymous. And you know what's interesting about that moment, John? I didn't even know who the hell AA was. I'd never been to a meeting. I didn't know anybody in AA. And yet there's the thought. Where did it come from? So the bottom line, I did. I called them. I got intergroup, and I got this wonderful human being, this wonderful lady on the phone who over the years I've nicknamed Madge. And the reason I nicknamed her Madge is because she talked like this. She was smoking, Pall Mall filters, a couple packs a day, right? But man, I tell you what a beautiful soul. What a beautiful human being. Because she was the gatekeeper, man. Her job was to interview you. And if you said the right things, what she would do, she would call somebody to come over and pick you up and take you to an AA meeting.
Wow.
And that's what she did. She called a guy by the name of Lauren. Lauren came and got me, picked me up, took me to a meeting, and I went to 4 meetings on June 8th, 1988. I went to a 12:30, a 4:30, a 6:30, and an 8:30. And I never looked back. I had never felt so home anywhere in my life. I felt I fit in. I could relate. These men, it was an all men's group. They were treating me with love and kindness, but they were really serious with me because they knew that I was suicidal. And so basically what they did, John, is they loved me until I could love myself.
Yeah, it sounds like a pivotal moment in your life
It
then.
was, for
Yeah.
sure.
There's an awful lot that you've talked about that, yeah, it's just, there's been a lot happening. And I can't imagine what it's like having that moment where you've got two people you believe to be your parents sitting down and telling you that they're not actually your parents.
Yeah.
How did that affect you as a child?
There was a lot of confusion. There was some frustration. There was even some anger, if you will. So it's kind of like a grieving process that I guess I went through. Now, I didn't guess, I did go through. Again, but it was like when the alcohol showed up, that was what took my focus away. Because when I started drinking, I'm like, oh, okay, so I don't have to feel this crap. I don't have to think about being adopted. I don't have to think about, my real biological father, who I've never seen or met in my entire life. I don't even know what he looks like. But when I drank, all that went away, right? Or at least I guess
off
it's
to another day.
Yeah, it's an illusion, right? That's all it is. It's still there. You just drink it off, temporarily. So anyway, yeah, it just influenced everything. After the alcohol, then the drugs showed up. So by the time I was a junior in high school, like I said, when I got expelled from school, I was doing hard drugs. And when you bring drugs onto the scene, it just accelerates everything. Everything's sped up in terms of the addiction side of things. But there again, man, on June 8th, that was the day. That was the day that, I learned so much in Alcoholics Anonymous, because you have the 12 steps that help you put your life back together. You have the 12 traditions that help you operate within the group. And then in the middle, they've got what's called the preamble, which is one of my favorite parts, because the preamble says, when anyone anywhere reaches out, I want the hand of AA to be there. And for that, I'm responsible. And man, I took that to heart. I became a gatekeeper, which meant that when a new person would come through the door, man, I was on them. Hey, hi, how you doing? My name's Dave. What's your name? Wow, where do you live? How's it going? What brings you to AA? So I would love them, because I'm showing them the same love that was showed to me. It was, it's kind of like it's funny. I relate it kind of like a network marketing program, right? Duplication. Do the same thing they do, and you're supposed to make money. Well, here was AA is do the same thing that happened to me and treat them with the love and kindness. Because the bottom line is that when they would talk to me and they would tell me what was going on, I could look them in the eyes and go, oh yeah. Oh yeah. No, I get that. I understand what you're telling me, man, because I was there. Yeah, I know what it's like to load a pistol and put it in my mouth. Yep, sure do. So there's a congruency with your experience with others, if you will. And that's why I believe AA is so powerful. It's why it works so well. Does it work for everybody? No, because it only works for people who work it. And, we're alcoholics. We have a daily reprieve based on our spiritual conditioning. And yeah, I've been sober for 36 years, but that doesn't mean that I could go out and have a beer tomorrow, because I can't ever, never. No. You know what I mean? My alcoholism never went away. It's still with me. Now, do I think about drinking now? No. Do I think about doing drugs? No, absolutely not. Haven't had those thoughts in a long, long time. But that doesn't mean I'm immune, because I'm not. And so I get asked all the time, like, so Dave, do you still go to meetings? Absolutely. I sure do. And I love it as much today as I did when I first showed up on June 8th, 1988. And so what's interesting about that part, though, John, is when I got sober, I had insomnia, and I was up late at night all the time. And I'm up at 3 o'clock in the morning, and there he is, Mr. Enthusiasm, a young, vibrant Tony Robbins. There he is selling a program in 1988. And I was listening to him, and I didn't like him. I thought he was an ass, to be candid with you. He's all motivated, and I'm not. Yeah. I'm miserable. And so I wanted nothing to do with him. But I was listening to him anyway, and he said a couple of things that really got me. The first thing he said that got my interest was, we'll do more to avoid pain than we will to gain pleasure. And I went, whoa. I mean, he's talking to me, right? Because drinking and drugging, that's what I'm doing. I'm either running from the pain or I'm trying to chase pleasure, trying to get something out of life, trying to feel something. And so when he said that, I went, well, that really resonated with me. And so I listened a little further. And then what really got me, though, was he said, do you know how human beings make decisions? He says, humans make decisions one of two ways. They make them out of inspiration or desperation. I went, whoa, okay, I'm pretty desperate, right? Maybe I should listen to this guy. And so he was selling a program. It was a 30-day program. It was called Personal Power. It's absolutely famous. Hundreds of thousands of people all over America bought his program. And it came on little white things called cassette tapes.
Wow. Yep.
So, yeah, I plugged them in, and I did what the man taught me to do, and it worked. Well, that was in 1988. Well, I loaned my program to a good friend of mine who was in AA. 7 years later, in 1995, that same friend who borrowed the program and went through it called me on the phone. And he said, hey, Dave, did you know that Tony Robbins, he called me and was all excited, right? He said, hey, man, did you know that Tony Robbins is coming to town? And I'm like, no clue. And he goes, come on, dude, come on, man. You got to go with me. You got me into this. I said, fine. Yeah, I'll go. Sure, let's do it. He goes, great. Let me call you back. So he calls me back like an hour later and he goes, done. We pick up the tickets at will call. Here's what they told us to do. Number one, drink a lot of water. You got to stay hydrated. This is a 4-day event. Bring snacks. You're going to spend a lot of time in the room. And I laugh because if anybody's been to a Tony Robbins seminar, they know, right? You are going to spend a lot of time in the room. Expect 10, 12, 14-hour days, literally. And then he said, bring a good attitude, be ready to play full out. And I said, Dan, how much was the ticket? And he said, $695. And I'm like, what? $100? Well, this is in 1995. What's that worth today? Like, 1.2 million. I mean, I don't know. Buy Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And so he goes, don't worry about it. You can pay me back. I know you'll pay me back. Yeah, of course I will. And just as he's getting ready to get off the phone, he goes, oh, wait, stop. I need to tell you something really important. I almost forgot the most important part. We're going to be doing a firewalk. And I'm like, what? Well, no, we're not. Hell no. This is what's going on in my head. I'm like, oh, hell no, We're not doing any firewalk. And another interesting point about that, John, just like I didn't know who AA was, I didn't know what a firewalk was. I don't know what that means. I've never been to a firewalk. I've never seen one. I've never heard of one. I don't know what that means. But the word fire and walk in the same sentence, my brain went, no. We're not doing that. But I'm not letting my buddy Dan know that, right? I'm just going along with it, right? I'm being subservient, going, yeah, sure, Dan. Yeah, firewalk. Yeah, bro. Yeah, sounds interesting. All right, bro, see you then. Well, the big day comes. And we get there, and we're in an arena, this big hotel, and there's 3,500 people sitting in this seminar. Tony took the stage at 2:00 in the afternoon. And the next thing I know, it's after midnight. We've been in a room with Tony Robbins for 10 hours. Right? Remember the guy said, bring snacks, right? Or you'll starve to death. It's a true statement. So the next thing I know, it's after midnight. We're all tired and exhausted. And all of a sudden, Tony goes, take your shoes off. And I'm like, oh, no. I ain't falling for that, pal. I know where you're going with that. And because I've already decided. I decided at the point I heard I'm not going to do it. I'm there. I'm not going to do it. I may watch, but that's about it. Well, I got a problem. I'm not going to take my shoes off. Well, the problem is, guess what the other 3,500 people are doing? They're taking their damn shoes
Peer
off.
pressure. Yeah,
Peer pressure.
A lot.
My buddy's taking his shoes off. And so I'm like, you got to be kidding me, man. And so I'm like, all right, just here's what we'll do. I'm figuring out my strategy. I'm like, here's what we'll do. So we're in this big, giant arena, and now we've got to go out into this big parking lot and do this firewalk. So I'm like, well, when we get out there, my buddy's 5'5". He's kind of short. So I said to myself, when you're walking out there, just lose him in the crowd. And then when you lose him, just go hang out in the back somewhere. No one's going to know. Well, wait a minute. Yeah, I'm going to know, but that's about it, right? So I take my shoes off. Well, it gets worse. As soon as he's got everybody walking out there, he's got everybody chanting and clapping, right? So you got 3,500 people walking out there going, yes, yes, yes. And I'm thinking, walking out there going, no, Ain't going to happen. And then when you get out there, it's even worse because he's got African drummers and it's intense. So the vibration of the drums are dun, 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 dun. And you're walking out there and you're feeling all that and you got adrenaline going on. I mean, it's insane. And then, so how do you walk 3,500 people? Well, you start off at the beginning of the day at like 2:00, they build this big giant fire. It's probably 35 feet wide, 70 feet long. And they just keep loading wood on it all day long, cord after cord after cord of wood. And so after 10 hours of burning it, it renders. It just burns down. You have this giant pile of coals. And then what they would do is they'd load those coals into a wheelbarrow. They'd bring a wheelbarrow in between 2 lanes of sod, of grass, of turf. I think they call it turf in the UK. And it's about 3 feet wide, 15 feet long. And they lay it on both sides. And then they take a flathead shovel and they sprinkle those coals on top of that sod, of that grass. And that's what you walk on. Well, I'm having none of it. I'm in the back. I'm hiding out. And here's what Tony Robbins knows. Why did Tony use firewalking for decades? Because he knows it can create one of the most incredible paradigm shifts of any experience that you can have out there. He also knows there's people like me. He knows what's going on. He knows we're hiding. He knows we're in the back. So what's he do? He trains people to come find you. You've got to be kidding me, Robbins. And so sure enough, man, I'm hiding in the back, and here comes this guy. He comes coming out of nowhere, and he locks eyes with me. He probably gets 15 feet, 12 feet from me, and he's looking at me really weird. You know, he's kind of twisting his head like a dog when it hears a funny noise, right? And he looks at me and he goes, "Hey, man, are you okay?" And when we're not okay, what do we say? "I'm good. I'm fine. Nothing to see here, pal. Move along," right? And he goes right for the kill shot. He goes, "Hey, man, you gonna walk tonight?" And I said, "Absolutely not." I'm like, "You idiot. What do you think I'm hiding in the back for? What's wrong with you, dude? Are you kidding me?" And you know, here's this guy, and he asked me a question after that changed my life forever. And by the way, I don't know who this guy is to this day, John. I have no idea. But that dude right there changed me, which I've been able to change over 500,000 people's lives with the Firewalk experience. Because the question he asked me was, "Well, wouldn't you at least like to watch?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure. Yeah, what? I'll watch. No problem there. Let's watch these idiots burn their feet off. This should be a lot of fun." And he goes, "Well, listen, man, you can't see anything from way back here." Well, she's telling the truth. I got 30,000 people in front of me. I can't see anything. I can hear it, right? They're chanting and clapping. As soon as they firewalk, then once they get to the other side, the celebration end, they're jumping up and down and they're screaming with exhilaration. You know, it's like the greatest thing they've ever done in their lives. The drums are going, dun, dun, you know, I mean, it's a dog and pony show, man. And he goes, "Well, listen, you can't see. Just get in line and eventually you'll get up there and you'll be able to see it." And he's telling the truth. So he's being congruent with what he's saying. So I did. I took the bait. I got in line and I'm kind of walking along. And a few minutes later, another stranger comes up to me. And he whispers in my ear. And he says, "He knows when you're ready. When he says go, you go." Pooh! And that guy just disappeared into the night. I mean, he was just like there and then gone. And I'm like, "What? What do you mean? What does that mean? He knows when you're ready. When he says go, you go." I don't understand what that means because I'm not doing it, right? So I can't relate to what he's telling me. And so I'm kind of trudging along there, and all of a sudden I get to a point. I still can't see in front of me. I got 1,000 people in front of me, but I can see at an angle, right? Because they set up all these lanes, these fire lanes. There was like 25 of them, right? So I get to a point where I can see at an angle, and they're doing it, John. These people, every race, creed, and color, age, they're firewalking. And my brain is going, why? We're mammals. We're taught to run from fire, not walk on it. And I'm mesmerized. I cannot take my eyes off watching these people. And so I'm really not focusing or paying attention to what's going on in front of me. And as I'm staring in at these people, the next thing I know, boom, guess where I am? You probably guessed it. I'm right there at the front of the line. And my brain's going, how the hell did you get here? And so I'm staring down at the coals, right? And they're bright red. It's like everything got real fast. And of course, the wheelbarrow's there. And so you can feel the heat coming up. So this is real and this is going on and it's happening. John, my heart is beating so hard, my chest is vibrating. I feel like it's going to jump out of my chest any second. Well, there's a trainer standing right there. And all of a sudden the trainer goes, eyes up, because I'm staring down. And all of a sudden now my eyes are up, right? Well, when you're in the room with Tony for 10 hours, guess what he teaches you to do? Keep your eyes up. Don't stare at what you fear. Look to the end. Look to the celebration end. That's where the reward is. Interesting metaphorically, right? And so now my eyes are up and the trainer goes, squeeze your fist and say yes. And I went, yes. And he went, and I went, yes. Well, then he got in my face and screamed at me. And so now I'm, it's kind of like ticked me off, right? And so I threw my hands in the air and I screamed yes as loud as I could. And the trainer goes, go, go, go. I took off. Well, remember the guy that came up and said, he knows when you're ready. When he says go, you go. I did. Well, here's the first thing I learned about Firewalking. And that is when you take the first step, you'll take the second, third, fourth, and fifth. I promise you. You don't take 2 steps and stop. I guarantee you that. Well, he positions a couple guys at the end, right? And they catch you and they stop you and they said, stop, wipe your feet and celebrate. And so now I'm wiping my feet and I'm celebrating. And I thought I burnt myself like in the moment. And I looked at my feet, and yeah, they're dirty, but there's no burns. And so now I'm standing there and it's exhilarating. It was literally one of the most exciting conquer the world type moments, if you will. It was spectacular. I felt like I could do anything. And I'm like, and you're jumping up and down and screaming and yelling, and you're down there with 3,000 people and everybody's celebrating. And in that moment, I'm like, hey, let's go get on the bus. Let's go climb Mount Everest, people. We got this. And but here's where it got really, really interesting, was the next day, right? 4-day event. That was day 1 that night. Now we're coming into day 2, and we're all standing in the foyer getting ready to go into the venue. And I'm standing with 3,500 people that experienced something the night before that is absolutely spectacular. And so there's an energy to that. There's a camaraderie. It's like these people, but you don't, but you really do know them, right? And I'm watching everybody and I'm like blown away because people are laughing. They're talking about the firewalk. They're talking about their fears. People are crying. They're hugging. They're connecting humanistically, unlike anything I'd ever experienced in my entire life. It's just beautiful. It is absolutely magical. And so I'm like, man, so did we drink the Kool-Aid last night? Is that what happened? Well, yeah, we did. We sure did. And so later in the event, I met one of Tony's trainers, a guy by the name of Ted Macy. Him and his wife, Mary Macy, were trainers for Tony. And I'm talking with Ted like, wow, look at me. I'm talking to one of Tony's trainers. And I'm having a conversation. And I asked him straight up. I said, so what's it like being in this environment on a regular basis? I'm assuming you come work these. He said, oh, yeah. He goes, it's spectacular. It is unbelievable to be in this environment. It's just, and he goes, and as a matter of fact, you see those people standing over there? And I'm like, yeah. And he goes, see them? They're wearing the black shirts with the pink writing? Yeah. He goes, dude, they're volunteers. They're just like you. They came to an event, were excited, wanted to come back and give back. So he goes, here's all you got to do. When you get home, call Robbins Research and tell them you want a volunteer crew application. Okay? So I did. And sure enough, like 9 weeks later, I got a letter in the mail. And it said, Dave Albin, congratulations. You've been selected to crew with the Anthony Robbins companies. Well, color my ass happy. The next thing I know, there I am. I'm at a live event, working with or alongside, if you will, Tony Robbins. Well, my career escalated pretty quickly. Number one, I had a military background and a security background. And so what came from that is they assigned me to help take care of some of Tony's celebrities. We always have a ton of celebrities at every event. So I was in charge of being placed on the security detail, which was, I could do a whole podcast with you, John, just on the experiences of all those celebrities. The other thing I did, because I lived on a farm and I knew how to use tools and a log splitter, and I knew the difference between hickory, locust, and oak, the different hardwoods and things, they put me on the fire team, which is what I wanted. And so once I was on the fire team, I think I crewed, I don't know, 4 or 5 times, and they actually offered me a subcontractor's position, because as a volunteer, you got to pay your way. You got to pay your airfare, you got to pay your hotel, you got to pay for your food, you got to pay for all that. So once I became a crew member, they paid for all that and paid me a little salary, some pensions, if you will, to to keep me engaged in the game there. And then they also did something smart. They gave me a free ticket. My wife would sit at home while I'm away. I was spending $1,500, $2,000 every time I went, and she's at home like this, right, going, "Who's this Tony Robbins guy?" Because I'm spending all this money and I'm going away for a week at a time, right? So she didn't like that. So she got a free ticket, and so I took her, and that was it. On day 4 after she graduated, we were walking on the beach in Fort Lauderdale, and she looked at me and she goes, "Okay, I get it. I drink the Kool-Aid too. This guy's a badass. If you want to go travel around the world with Tony Robbins, as long as we don't have to take any money out of our savings account, I understand why you're doing it. Let's." Well, interesting enough, after she gave me permission to do all that, a couple of years later, Tony brought me. Well, they hired me as an assistant captain of the fire team, and then Tony called me into the office one day and said, "Albie, I'd like you to take over my firewalks globally." And we talked about some things. I said, "Hey, one of the challenges I'm going to have is I homeschool." And he goes, "Okay, well, what if we paid to have your kids go on the road with us? Would that help?" And I'm like, "Yeah, of course it would." So literally my kids at the age of like 7 and 10, I think they were 6 or 9 in that area, their very first event was Sydney, Australia.
Wow.
So there I am now. I'm on the road full time with Tony Robbins, with my family, traveling all over the world, putting on his firewalks. So that all went down in 2003. And then 2005, we set the world record. We came over to your neck of the woods. We came to the UK. We went out to the Docklands, out at the Excel Center in London, and we set the world record. Well, we firewalked 12,300 people. And then that happened in 2005. And then to kind of move this forward, in 2014, I'm driving down the road and my phone rings and it's Google. And they're like, "Hey, is this the Dave Albin that does the firewalks for Tony Robbins?" "Yes. What can I do for you?" "Well, if you're not under any contractual obligation or non-compete, we'd like to talk to you about hiring you." And I'm like, "Okay, well, homeboy's a free agent. What you got?" And they said, we have 148 executives, and we want to create a paradigm shift experience for them. And we want to do it here at corporate headquarters in Mountain View, California. And, we'll pay you this. And I went, "Okay, well, I could work with you guys." And so that was it. That's when, the thought process of starting my own company, that's when the wheels started turning. And we created Firewalk Productions in 2014. Right after that, I went back to Tony and I said, "Tony, I love you." And he goes, "You're leaving, aren't you?" "Yeah, it's time for me to go, man. You don't need me anymore. You got a half a dozen people out there in that parking lot that can do my job. So you're good. Stranding you by any means." And that was true. There was really good people who have come in behind me and have continued on with the whole Firewalk experience for the Anthony Robbins companies, which was a beautiful thing. And then shortly after Google, next thing I knew, I was at NASA, and then Notre Dame, and then Chick-fil-A, and then Virginia Tech, and then Microsoft, and then Heineken, and the YMCA, and then the Entrepreneurs Organization. It just escalated from there. And the next thing I know, I'm on the air live with you, John. So you just never know what's going to happen.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that definitely comes across. It seems like a lot of your journey hasn't been scripted, it's not been planned, but it seems like you've definitely been open for opportunities. And I think it's quite kind of symbolic doing that firewalk. It's just actually putting yourself out there.
Well,
and keeping your mind open to opportunities like that.
I've done a lot of other things, surfing and jumping out of airplanes and bungee jumping and all these other things, right? As some thrill-seeking type fun, but there's nothing on earth like firewalking. It's been around for 1,000 years, right? So culturally, it was used for very specific rite of passage reasons. It's a spiritual connection between you and the tribe and what's going on in life. And so Tony just realized that, wow, I could bring this experience into my seminars. And if we can do that, I'll create one of the most incredible seminars in the world by far. There will be nothing on earth like it. Well, guess what? He's right. You talk to people that have firewalked, they never forget it. They may forget the facilitator, they may forget what was said or whatever, but they never forget that moment. They never forget after they firewalk and they go, okay, so if I can walk on coals that are 1,000 degrees and not burn myself and not hurt myself, what else can I do? And that's the paradigm shift, right? That's what causes people to think outside the box. And so, again, Tony knew that. But if we look around culturally, John, man, it's everywhere. The Tahitians, the people of India, oh my gosh, they've been doing it. It's rite of passage for them. They do it to this day all the time, and including, the people of Portugal and the Spaniards and the Indo-Europeans and the Hawaiians and the Polynesians and the Native American Indians here in the United States. So it's there, been around for a long time. It's just that Tony has turned it into a motivational experience to gain leverage on people as he takes them through UPW, which is Unleash the Power Within, the Firewalk experience. So it works.
You've talked a lot about how it's helped people individually. How does that help in a team doing the Firewalk experience? What does that create in a team?
Because not only are you experience it in yourself, but you're experienced it with the people that you work with. So when you do an event like that together, collectively, it changes all of you at the same time. It just does. It's like it's kind of like a near-death experience, if you will. I'll use that as an example. So if you're with 3 or 4 or 5 people and you almost all die together, there's a bond between you because you experience something that is such a high level. And so the Firewalk's very similar, right? And that's what I was explaining on day 2 when I was sitting in the foyer getting ready to go into the venue. I was watching all these people and I felt like I knew and loved every single one of them. It's such a magical connection between how we interact with each other humanistically. And so that's the guarantee. That's why people hire me. That's why Google hired me. Google knew. They knew. Well, I mean, it was no question they wanted to create a paradigm shift experience. They had invested a lot of money and a lot of time in 148 executives. So when they graduated, they wanted to create something spectacular that would bond them together forever. You can go golfing. Yeah, well, that's not going to bond you forever. You can go on a scavenger hunt. There's all kinds of team building experiences that you can have, but there's nothing on earth like the Firewalk experience. And that's why these other big companies have hired me. They know. Here's what a CEO knows. If a CEO is worth their grain of salt, then they know what doesn't challenge you doesn't change you. That's why, like Navy SEALs, for example. How do you become a Navy SEAL? Hard, kick-ass training for months because they're trying to break you. That's the whole job of the instructors. It's like the night swim that they surprise them with. When they're down in San Diego going through their training, they put them in a boat. And at 3 o'clock, pop them out of bed and say, you've got 2 minutes to get out of bed. Next thing you know, they're in a boat. Next thing you know, they're in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. It's pitch black. And on the ride out there, they tell them about all the killer sharks that are in the waters. And then they tell them, jump. So you're in there with your own thoughts, right? In the middle of the ocean with sharks. And so you can imagine every sound, everything is a shark. And you've got to be able to control your mind. You've got to be able to get that under control. And that's what firewalking does. It gives you that shark moment, if you will, to be able to go, wow, I got this. And so again, it just propels you forward. It creates confidence. It creates self-worth. And that's why I do it for kids. I do this all the time for kids. We include the board break too. It's a kind of a proprietary process that we have that they break a board, right? We have them write something on front of it they want to move towards. We have them write something on the back they need to move away from. I have them write anybody's name on the board they're in conflict with, right? So, if forgiveness or reconciliation is part of that relationship, tonight, it goes away tonight. You're going to give it to the fire. So then I have them write anybody's name on the board that they've lost, a grandparent or a parent or a friend or a sibling, whatever. and I invite them to the ceremony, if you will. It creates that rite of passage, and it brings in that area or that relationship between the person they've lost and that energy. And then they break the board. Then they walk them in a circle, and then they go throw the board into the fire, and then they firewalk. And then at the end, I put them all in a circle, and I do a proprietary experience with them where I get everybody's heart to beat at the same time. So that's the firewalk experience, right? When they hire me. So, if we do this on a Saturday for a company, on Monday morning when they come to work, you got a group of individuals they are not the same. They're not. And I get a lot of feedback, obviously, from the clients, and a lot of clients hire us again. That was another thing that happened too. It dawned on me. A friend of mine told me, he said, Dave, you ought to run an academy. Because you're one guy, man. You ought to train some people to help back you up. Now, I've had the fire team from Tony Robbins. I've got 1,000 of those. But so, a couple of years ago, I created what's called the Dave Albin Firewalk Academy. And so what they do is they come up here to the Appalachian Mountains where I live in North Carolina, and they spend 5.5 days with me. That's coming up this October, as a matter of fact. And it's a spectacular event. I teach them everything. I teach them how to put on a firewalk, how to do a glass walk, the board break, the brick break, the arrow break, the rebar bend. And so I teach them storytelling and how to get on stage and present, how to talk to fire marshals, how to approach a CEO, how to sell your product and service to whoever. We teach them everything, how to join a chamber of commerce here in America and use that chamber to, get your information out there to the world. And so they graduate, and when they go home, then they can go put on firewalks and board breaks and so on in their own community. Or I get a lot of different people that want to attend. I get corporate people that send somebody from their HR department, from the human resources. They send somebody so that person could go back and facilitate these experiences in their own company. I get trainers, I get coaches, I get teachers, I get entrepreneurs, I get business owners. And they come up and they spend 5.5 days with me, and it is definitely one of the most extraordinary experiences they'll ever have. And the great thing is then when they graduate, now they're located throughout the United States or globally. I've had students come in from Canada and around the world. And so now I have those people as a backup. Sometimes when somebody calls me, they can't afford me. They just can't. And I get that. However, one of my students might be able to do it for them. And especially if there's proximity, right? Like one of my students last year, 2 months after she graduated, I got a call from somebody in around Disney World, around Orlando, Florida. And I was not in her price range. And I asked her, so what's your budget? And she told me, and I go, well, you know what? I have somebody in Orlando that's graduated from my academy. They can do it for you if you guys come to terms. And so she did. And so one of my students down there, Jessica Brace, who's just such a sweetheart, such an amazing soul. She's brilliant. She's funny. She's a single mom. She works her butt off. She's done a ton of events. So she went out there and embraced it. And not only has she changed a lot of lives, she's made some really good money. So there's that as well. Again, the Dave Albin Firewalk Academy, which is on our website.
Yeah, there's two things in particular. I think we couldn't talk about firewalking without talking about health and safety and injuries. Have you ever had any injuries, or
no?
Or how do you not have injuries when you're doing these firewalks?
Well, that's a great question. You gotta focus on what you're doing. It's game on. Yeah, no one's ever been hospitalized. I've walked 500,000 people. My team has walked everybody from Oprah to Usher, and a whole bunch of people and celebrities in between. There's an art and a science to it, if you will. I walk with every single person. When they walk, I'm walking with them right there so that they don't slip and these kinds of things. And you're not standing on the calls all that long. Can you get a burn? Yeah, of course you can. But is it going to need hospitalization? No. But less than probably 5%, somewhere in that ballpark, actually even get a little blister on their foot. But the reward of what you did on the other side after you celebrate the firewalk is going to live with you forever. That little blister on your foot is going to be gone in 24 hours. So I call them little badges of honor anyway, man. It's like, have I been burnt? Yeah. Now I do some extreme firewalking where we walk 100 feet, not just 15 feet. We do fire standing, which is things that I tell everybody, don't even think about doing this. Don't try this at home, boys and girls, as they say. We talk about some of these things at the academy, but that's not what people want. People want to know how to facilitate this. They need to know what kind of wood to use and how long do you let it burn and how do you protect the surfaces and what about insurance and what about safety and all these kinds of things. So yeah, no one's ever been seriously hurt, and I don't suspect anyone ever will, because again, we have a lot of safety built in to the events, and there's a lot of protocols that we follow, and that ensures everybody has a spectacular experience.
And something I wanted to touch on as well, because obviously there are other companies that do firewalking, and listening to your stories, you've had a magnificent journey and done some amazing experiences. So what is it about yourself that sets you apart? What have you done differently that means you've been able to be as successful as you have been?
Wow. I don't think I've ever been asked that question. Well, obviously the fact that, I was Tony Robbins' main guy for almost 20 years, that's an influence. I mean, I was literally sitting in a meeting so I got a call from a potential client, and she said, "Hey, I'm with so and so, and the CEO of our company wants to put on a firewalk for 350 of their sales and marketing people, but the CEO wants to meet you in person, not over Zoom." I'm like, "Okay, well, here's my per diem. This is what I'm going to charge him to fly me out to Arizona." And so we got out there, and she was great. She picked me up at the airport. She got me checked into my room, picked me up for breakfast the next morning, and we went to their corporate headquarters, beautiful in Scottsdale, Arizona. And we went up to the fourth floor, and we walked into the boardroom, and there was probably 10, 12 people in there, including the CEO and her, the assistant. And we sat there, and the CEO started the meeting, and he said, "Well, as you know, ladies and gentlemen, we've got Dave Albin here. He's with Firewalk Productions. He's the guy we're considering hiring to do our Firewalk experience. Does anybody have any questions before we get started?" Well, the corporate attorney is sitting like 3 chairs away from me, right? And the attorney, he goes, "Yeah, I got a question. How many of our people are going to get burnt?" And I looked at him, kind of startled, right? And I go, "Well, that's a fair question. I would ask that question as well. Let me ask you a question so I can properly answer that question. How many of you sitting at this table have ever taken your family to a pool, to a beach, or to a lake and gotten them sunburned? Anybody not do that? Right? We've all done it, correct? Yeah. How many of you took them back a second time and got them burned again? Well, let me share something with you that's very important. That's 100 times more dangerous than any firewalk you'll ever do with me." And as soon as I said those words, John, the CEO goes, "Oh, Mr. Albin," he goes, "apparently we've made a big mistake in bringing you here." And I went, "Uh-oh." He didn't like what I said. And he goes, and his COO is sitting right next to him. And he turns to his COO and he goes, "Look, if this guy's good enough for Tony Robbins and he's good enough for NASA and Google, he's good enough for us. Book him. Let's go to lunch." Whoa.
Amazing.
So they know. CEOs know. They know that if they want to create a golden handcuff, if they want to create one of the most powerful experiences, is there some risk to it? There's some perceived risk, right? But it's perceived. Again, is the thought of jumping out of the plane or the act of jumping out of the plane what changes the person? When you say yes to something that scares you, then you'll say yes to other things that scare you. And that's fear, right? Because you got to get a hold of fear, because fear's a liar. And I also say, fear's there to guide us. However, if fear becomes your jailer, it's going to steal everything from you. And if you want a high quality of life and you want to live an extraordinary life, then the fears you don't overcome become your limits. And so that's what CEOs and business owners figure out. It's okay because it's scary for them too. Imagine a CEO that doesn't really know much about firewalking, but he says yes to it, and he's going to go put 350 of his people, his sales and marketing team, have them walk across that fire. That's pretty gutsy, And a lot of times during my talk, I'll mention that. I'll talk about that. One of the things I do too is that I've got a screen behind me, and I've got video that I can show. And I put a picture of a guy by the name of Eric Weihenmayer on the back behind me, and I'll talk for 20 minutes. And then eventually I'll come back around. I'll say, who here can tell me where my friend's standing? And it's pretty obvious. And somebody in the crowd will yell, Mount Everest. And I'll say, that's correct. And I want you to know something else about Eric. Yes, he summited Everest, but he's also been to the top of the summit of the 7 highest mountains on 7 continents in the world. What I'm saying is he climbed the 7 highest mountains on earth, and he got to the top of every single one of them. But here's what you don't know about Eric. He's blind.
Wow.
So let that sink in. The only reason you don't have the life that you want is that you're telling yourself you can't have it. You're making up some story. Meaning, you want to change your life? Change your story. I think Viktor Frankl gave us the greatest example of that, because everything in our life, I don't care what happens to you, you decide. You make up the story about what happened to you. So if you make up a crappy story, you'll have a crappy life. If you make up an extraordinary story, you'll have an extraordinary life, because that's what it comes down to. The only reason you don't have something in your life is there's a story that you tell yourself why you can't have it. So I say all the time, you want to change your life? Change your damn story. And that's exactly what Viktor Frankl did. He wrote the book, Man's Search for Meaning. Man's Search for Meaning is literally one of the most powerful books ever written. Go read it, but prepare yourself, because it's not a fun read in some areas. And so, Viktor was in Auschwitz. He went to the Nazi concentration camp of Auschwitz. And they took everything from him. They assassinated his family. You're standing outside, you're cold, you're naked. They've taken your dignity. They feed you maybe. And every single day, there goes more people off to the chamber. And so you're living with every single second, whether you're going to die a horrible death. So imagine getting up every day or every moment of your life. That's what you're thinking. That's all that's a part of your world. Nothing else matters. And so they took everything from those men and women. But here's what Viktor figured out. He said, there's one thing you can't take from me. I have to give it up. I have to let you take it. I have to relinquish this. And that is his attitude. I'm in control of that if I want to be. And so one of the things Viktor came up with, he goes, and he created purpose, is really what happened. And he said, somebody's got to get out of here to tell this story. And that's how he got out, because that became the driving force. And so he figured it out, how to stay alive. And he realized it was purpose. And he realized it was his story that he was telling himself. Same thing in your life. Every single day we have an opportunity to, when we wake up every morning, we have an opportunity to live a life that we want to live. And so it comes down to the patterns that happen to us and how we respond to those things. What do you do every morning when you get up? What are you telling yourself? Like I talk about 3 things in my talks. One of the things, and that's what we have or what we don't have. Focus on what you have, you'll find gratitude. Focus on what you don't have, you won't. That's the way it works, one or the other. And then finally, that we think about on a regular basis, this is going on in our heads all the time, is, are you living in the past, the present, or the future? So if you're in in AA, it's funny, we say if you're living in the past or you're living in the future, you're crapping all over today. You got one leg in the future, one leg in the past. Look what you're doing, to your moment. And there's another book, right? The Power of Now, Eckhart Tolle. We find greatness is in the moment. That's all. That's where it is. That's where it lives. And that's where you have to be if you want to live that extraordinary life. Like right now with you and I, right? It's just you and I right now. And so to be able to exchange information and ideas and concepts and beliefs and support and love and joy and kindness with each other, we're in the moment, so we're enjoying it. even if a listener right now, if you're either listening to this intently and you're paying attention, then you're in the moment. If you're thinking about all the crap that happened yesterday, or you're thinking about something tomorrow that you don't know whether it's going to happen or not, then life can be pretty challenging. So one of the things I say quite often is quit looking for heroes and just be one. And that's
been some fantastic messages, and I'd love exactly what you're embodying, which is just you write your own story. And I think that's a great message to be leaving our listeners with.
Yeah, for sure.
I really appreciate all of your time today, and there's been some amazing insights as well. What I would like to do is just give you an opportunity, if anyone wants to find out a little bit more about what we have spoken about the firewalking, about what you're up to, and one thing we've not really touched on, but if they wanted to find out about the glass walking as well, where do we go about this?
Well, if you go to our website, it's all there. If you want to, if somebody literally, I've had people that have listened to podcasts who have come to our academy. So we're coming up on it quickly. It's October. It starts on the 8th and it runs through the 12th of October. So, if they want to come to something like that, they better get a hold of my staff fairly quickly. But when you go to our website, if you want to look at the the Firewalk or the Glass Walk. The Glass Walk, I created the Glass Walk because firewalking isn't always logistically possible. You're doing it outside, you're dealing with the elements, you're dealing with, fire marshals, and, there's all these other dynamics that are going along with it. Where a Glass Walk, you come inside, you have a suitcase, you open it up, you put on gloves, you spread out the glass, and you teach them how to do it. So the Glass Walk, again, is more of an indoor sport, if you will, based on the Firewalk, which is an outdoor sport. But again, we teach you all that at the academy. We teach you how to do that. We teach you how to make your own glass kits. We teach you about the science and how that's going on. We talked about the Firewalk, the world record in London at 12,300. I also set the world record glass walk in Paris in 2019. We glass walked over 1,500 people. And so, again, when you look down and you look at that glass and you go, okay, I'm walking on glass. We've all cut ourselves, right? So it's like, well, it's scary. And again, what doesn't challenge you doesn't change you. That's just the bottom line. And so it's another opportunity, to do that. So yeah, so they can go to our website. It's firewalkadventures.com, firewalkadventures, all one word.com. It's all there. And I'm very accessible. So if somebody wants to get on and we do Zoom calls all the time. In fact, I've got a Zoom call later today with a potential client. So, we're there to help you decide if this is the right thing for you to be doing.
That's been amazing. Thank you very much for your time.
I'll
put a link and everything in the description as well, so anyone can just click on it.
Appreciate you very much.
But thanks very much for your time.
My pleasure, John. Let's do it again sometime.